Good morning, students. Happy morning. Welcome to our next virtual coaching class organized by Board of Studies ICAI. We will continue with our discussion on the topic demand and recovery. Yesterday we had a marathon in terms of understanding our topic on demand and recovery. Today, let us continue with where we have stopped with our discussions on demand and recovery. I hope you people had a hectic day, Mahashivratri, and then your classes. Don't worry, work is worship. Give more attention to your examination and preparation. Rest all things fall in place. Till your examination gets through, no other navigation. Have utmost attention to your preparation and practice. Now, yesterday we had our discussion on this section 77. Let me go to my section 77. There's one doubt yesterday in the discussion in relation to this tax collected and not paid. So what if this tax which was collected and not paid, would the provision be invoked under section 76 or section 73, 74? There was one technical question. Let me come back to my Excel file to make you understand this particular question which was asked. One question was asked, sir, taxes collected and not paid. Taxes collected and not paid. Now, I was giving an example on this point where taxes, once it is collected, along with the penalty, the officer is going to issue a notice under section 76. There was a question, sir, why is that 73 or 74 is not invoked? I have section 73 or section 74. So why is that this section 73 or 74 is not invoked, rather section 76 is invoked? Now look at the beauty of this section. Taxes collected and not paid. Taxes collected and not paid. Now, this comes with a predetermined conception of the officer concerned. The officer says, gentlemen, you have supplied goods or services, money is also received. Now, my section 73, 74, if you have to analyze, yesterday, please visualize my Excel file, please visualize my PowerPoint presentation. There are four elements of my allegation. Taxes not paid, short pay, erroneous refund, and the fourth element called my input tax wrongly availed or utilized. So out of these four, any of the allegation is there. My note is under 73, 74, where they're supposed to establish fraud, willful misstatement, suppression, right? Now, establishing these elements is something which is required by a tax officer. Now, under 76, the officer concerned does not bother. Do you have an intention to fraud? Do you have an intention to suppress? All these things are set aside. The officer says, in simple terms, pay the tax along with penalty. Penalty is 100%. This is what my officer says in relation to section 76. Hope you are clear with this point, ma'am. My contention of allegation of fraud, willful misstatement or suppression is not required. Rather, if the officer is invoking section 73, kindly recollect, under section 73, my law says pay a penalty of 10% or 10,000, whichever is higher. But under section 76, my penalty is equivalent to the tax amount. Now, why is this so burdenful, so painful? Discourage the uh, dishonest taxpayers. My law says discourage the dishonest taxpayers and encourage the honest taxpayers. Encourage the honest taxpayers. This is one reason why my section 76 is invoked. Now, I'll come back to our discussion what we had yesterday on section 77. Now, please recollect our discussion we had on section 77. Taxes wrongly collected and paid. Now, yesterday I have given two scenarios. IGST has been paid instead of CGST, SGST. CGST and SGST has been paid instead of IGST. Now, this is what we have discussed in our yesterday's session, right? Now, in your process of accounting, in your process of auditing, you, in the 3 years of your internship, 3 years of your internship, there could be a possibility, where you don't know how to apply, you don't know how to read your place of supply provisions. Erroneously, when you have misunderstood your place of supply provisions, there could be a possibility. Yesterday I gave one example in relation to immovable property. Now, this particular scenario one, there is a accommodation service. Provided by a service provider who is there in Haryana. This particular service provider who is registered in Haryana, he gave a service of accommodation service to a recipient who is hailing from Tamil Nadu. Now, when this particular service was given, service provider erroneously considered that this service is a interstate supply. Reason, service provider is in Haryana and recipient is in the state of Tamil Nadu. This particular service provider has failed to read the provisions of section 12, subsection 3 of IGST law. Friends, please recollect, whenever there is a service rendered in relation to immovable property, my place of supply happens to be a location where the property is located, right? So in this case, the service provider is supposed to charge actual provision is actual place of supply is Haryana. Now, what should I have charged? CGST and SGST Haryana. This should have been the tax charge. Erroneously, IGST was paid. Now, this is the provision which was taken care under my section 77. Section 77 says taxes wrongly collected. They're not disputing. You have done a blunder. You have done a mistake. The provisions of section 77 clearly says, look, wrongly you have collected a tax and you have paid that tax. You have collected tax wrongly and you have paid that particular tax. Now let us understand what does my provision says. I'll come back to my presentation. Now, hope you are able to see my presentation now. This particular provision says, section 77, a registered person who has paid central tax or state tax, as the case may be, by the central and union territory tax on a transaction which is considered by him as an intrastate supply. Let me do the annotation for your understanding. You have considered the supply to be an intrastate supply. If it is an intrastate supply, CGST, SGST or CGST, UGST would have been charged. But but this particular supply subsequently held to be a intrastate supply. Now, this aspect, this element of converting an intrastate supply to interstate supply, why does this happen? This happens erroneously. I have wrongly understood the provisions. Now let me correct that. So the provision says, look, you have paid the tax. Please collect the tax as a refund. Please collect the tax as a refund which was erroneously paid. Which was erroneously paid. So whatever intrastate supply I have paid, which should have been paid as an interstate supply, my section 77 says, don't worry, you claim a refund of that particular erroneous tax. So why do I do that? As I said, constitutional authority, a tax which was paid erroneously can be claimed as a refund. So what will happen to the proper tax which you have to pay? Don't worry. The tax what you have not paid, you pay that tax now. Now, the provisions clearly say, whatever tax you have paid erroneously, don't worry, you claim a refund. And also, the moment you have paid a tax, my provision says you are not required to pay any interest. Now, this is the beauty. My section 77 read with section 18. The law makes it clear that, look, you have paid tax called 18%. Either it could be CGST, SGST, or IGST. Since you have paid a wrong tax, I wouldn't penalize you. First and foremost, you claim a refund of that. Second, you pay the regular tax what you have to pay. So what happens to interest under section 50? Provisions clearly says that don't worry. I'm not going to recover any interest from you. I'll come to my Excel file. There's fantastic case law from a state of Kerala. I'll give you the background of this particular case law in relation to section 77. Now, hope you're able to see my Excel file. Ma? Now, there's one particular case called Mr. Saji versus State GST Officer in the state of Kerala. This is one fantastic provision which was analyzed by a professional. Now, this gentleman has caused movement of goods. This movement of goods happened from Kerala to the state of Tamil Nadu. Now, when the goods movement happened, the goods movement occasioned from Kerala to Tamil Nadu, tax invoice along with e-way bill has been prepared. Now, this is a movement of goods from the state of Kerala to the state of Tamil Nadu on account of a tax invoice, on account of a supply, where my tax invoice was there, e-way bill is also there. Taxes charged were SGST and CGST Kerala. Taxes to be charged IGST Tamil Nadu. Now, this is what the state GST officer has contended. The contention of state GST officer is, look, you as a registered person from Kerala, you are moving the goods to the state of Tamil Nadu. When the goods are moving from Kerala to Tamil Nadu, this should be a interstate supply. This gentleman has erroneously raised a tax invoice as if it is an intra-state supply. Now, from supplier in Kerala to recipient in Karnataka, I repeat, my supplier is in Karnataka, Kerala, recipient is in Tamil Nadu. Kerala is a Supply, recipient is in Tamil Nadu. Now, nature of supply, it should have been interstate supply. It should have been interstate supply. Now, the tax officer, this particular state tax officer has issued a notice on this particular gentleman. What he has said, this gentleman says, the state GST officer has said, a notice under section 129. We are going to cover this in a while. Notice under section 29, where e-way bill provisions are invoked, what he says, you pay a proper tax, you pay a proper tax of IGST. Then the consignment vehicle will be released. But the state GST officer say, I'm not going to release your consignment. I'm not going to release your consignment until and unless you pay the proper tax to the state of Kerala. What is that proper tax? IGST. This gentleman has read these provisions of section 77, and he argued before the officer concerned. Look, I have issued a tax invoice with wrong taxes. The law says claim a refund, pay proper taxes. Law says claim a refund, pay the proper taxes. Look at the argument, a fantastic argument. This particular gentleman has a presence of mind. He said, my dear officer, look, I have paid a wrong tax. Now, please understand, when I have paid a wrong tax, you are the officer who is going to sanction me refund. At the same time, you are the officer who is going to recover the taxes from me once again. See, I have to pay 18% IGST. Now, you have to give me a refund of 9% CGST, 9% SGST. And law says pay that 18% IGST. Also, there is some element called interest on that particular supply. Fantastic argument. This gentleman said, you being my adjudicating authority, you being my jurisdictional officer, you do the appropriation of these taxes. He said, appropriate the wrong taxes with the taxes payable. Now, this is how the judicial system should work. This is how my thought process on any taxation not complied should be looked upon. This particular officer has said, no, I don't have a mechanism. I cannot do that. You file a refund application. I'll see about that later. Right now, you have to pay that IGST to get the consignment released. So this gentleman knocked at the door of my Kerala High Court by filing a writ petition. This gentleman has put forth the same arguments before the High Court of Kerala. High Court of Kerala said, fantastic. The officer concerned is the same officer who has to grant a refund. He is the same officer who is to recover. And section 77 very clearly says, taxes paid erroneously, so no interest. When taxes are paid, clearly the GST provision says that as long as 18% to be paid. Only thing, intrastate erroneously paid as interstate, or interstate erroneously paid as intrastate. Now, as long as the revenue has received the money, interest should not be collected from the registered person. And the Kerala High Court say, this Saji who has put forth his arguments are very valid in nature, and they have squashed the assessing officer's contention. They have put back the responsibility on the assessing officer, saying that, look, the assessee has complied from his point of payment of taxes. Once the assessee has did his job, you as the assessing officer has to pay back that wrong tax along and do the appropriation at your end. This is what the judgment of Kerala High Court stands. And This is one remarkable judgment across India. Many states, chartered accountants. When we do the audit of the assessee, where we come across this situation of wrong payment of taxes, there was a recommendation paid to the particular assessee saying that don't worry. Section 77 clearly gives you a guidance that in case if you have paid a wrong tax, claim that as a refund and pay proper tax. No interest is applicable. So either you can do that or write a letter to your jurisdictional officer for him to get that appropriation done at his end. So friends, this is what we need to understand from section 77 and the reference to my section 19 of IGST Act. This both provisions, section 77 read with section 19 of IGST Act. So these two provisions say, in case you have paid a wrong tax, don't worry, claim that as a refund and pay a proper tax. So what about interest? Non-applicability of interest. So this is one fantastic provisions. Most of us doesn't know. I would recommend use this particular thing from your examination point of view. So what I can expect from my examination, a 4 marks theory question, 4 marks theory question. They'll give you a case law. Like in relation to rendering of service. Since the service provider has erred in terms of rendering the tax, he has charged a tax called IGST. There was a provision under section 12 which talks about intermediary. Now, as an intermediary, the person where he is registered, the place of supply shall be that intermediary. So SGST, CGST should have been charged. Erroneously, IGST was charged. You can invoke section 77 and say, the registered person can claim a refund of IGST and he can pay back CGST, SGST. No interest is applicable under section 77. Friends, this is what we are going to talk to the concerned registered person saying that you haven't done anything wrong. Law has clearly given a direction that this can be appropriated by the authority concerned. Next. This is one provision, section 78. Section 78, this is one provision which talks about a recovery mechanism. Please follow me carefully. From here, carefully go through these provisions. I'll make as simple as possible to make you understand these provisions. Section 78 talks about my recovery. Now, you have read something called show cause notice. You have read something called audit under GST law. You have read something called search, seizure, and search and seizure under GST law. Audit has been conducted. Audit memo was given. On the basis of audit memo, a show cause notice is given. Based on the show cause notice, an order has been given. Please keep in mind, the moment an order has been served, you cannot sit silent on that. You cannot sit silent on that. The moment an order is given, you have to either go for an appeal or you have to pay the taxes. Let me come to my Excel file to make more clear on this. Audit memo. This audit memo gets converted as my notice. From the show cause notice, this gets converted as an adjudicating order. From adjudicating order, it goes on to, this is a finality. Once I have an adjudication order received, you as a taxpayer, you have two options. Point number one, admit and pay the tax along with interest and penalty. Disagree and file an appeal with the contention of the order. Now, I bring it to your knowledge once again. as a professional chartered accountant, as a qualified chartered accountant, whenever there is an order which has been served on the assessee, you either admit and pay the tax along with interest and penalty, or you disagree and file an appeal with the authority concerned. Please keep in mind there is a time limit for filing an appeal. Now, what does my section 78 talks about this particular recovery mechanism? My section 78 says, any amount which is payable, by a taxable person in pursuance of an order. Look, the moment an order is passed, you're bound to pay taxes on that particular order. The moment an order is passed, that particular person shall pay, that particular tax. How long? Within a period of 3 months. Within a 3 months of 3 months from the date of service of an order. Please keep in mind this servicing of an order. Generally done by speed post or register post acknowledgement due, or on an registered email available with the department officer. Now, this is one important aspect. Education to you as a registered person, education to the registered person is very important. I repeat, this serving of an order is very important aspect to you as a tax professional, as a professional chartered accountant, and also to a registered person is always important. The address which you have given at the time of registration, email ID which was given at the time of registration, these are the two things which will be kept with the department for communication of an order. 99.99%, my order will be sent through a registered post acknowledgement due. We call technically as RPAD. I repeat, registered post acknowledgement due. So what is the advantage of this particular thing? The moment I send a speed post, the moment I send a registered post, there is a recording of a data on whom this particular notice has been served and on what date that particular notice has been received. So once the order has been serviced, that means you received an order within 3 months, you have to pay the tax. So what if I fail? Failing which, the recovery proceedings shall be initiated. My recovery proceedings shall be initiated. Now, this is one of the painful job for a honest taxpayer concerned. Provided that where proper officer considers it is expedient in the interest of the revenue for reasons to be recorded in writing, he requires the taxable person to make such payment within a period less than a period of 3 months as specified by him. Now, please understand, the moment an order has been served, technically 3 months is the time limit given to you. Now, this 3 months, if I don't pay the money as a registered person, if I don't pay money back to the assessing officer, the proper officer concerned, my officer will initiate a recovery proceedings. Now, this recovery proceedings are very, very serious in nature. So how does the recovery happen? First and foremost, a notice will be attached, a notice will be put onto the building where you are doing your business activity. Please keep in mind, attachment of a government notice on a premises is something which is drawing attention of the public at large. Look at the scenario. So there is an office, a notice is attached to the wall of an office, an employee who's coming into the organization, a vendor who's coming into the organization, a customer who's walking to the organization, all those people will get to know that this particular registered person with whom the transactions are being done is a regular defaulter. The moment a notice is attached to the building, it is a very serious issue which indicates that these people have violated the compliances with the law. So one, notice attached to the building. Second, they attach the mobile, immovable property. Whatever assets are there in the business, the movable property will be attached. Meaning they confiscate, they take away your movable assets. They also attach your immovable property. What happens in your debt recovery tribunal? Like in case of banking, people who have done the audit of banks, there is something called debt recovery tribunal. The moment there is a default for the bank loans, the property is attached to the bank, means they vacate the persons from the building, they put a notice that this particular building is under debt recovery tribunal, they have put it for auction. They have put it for auction. The property of the assessee shall be put forth for an auction. Also, there are a couple of provisions called garnishee recovery provisions. One of the painful provisions where garnishee recovery provisions means the tax officer is going to bloat away the credibility of the registered person. What happens? The proper officer gets your balance sheet, he gets your financial statements. In your financial statements, there will be registered persons, there will be a sundry data to whom money has the supply happened, money has to be recovered. So what does the tax officer will do? He'll write a letter to your sundry data. The tax officer is going to write a letter to the sundry data saying that Mr. X or Mrs. X, you being a sundry data to this particular gentleman, we have issued a proposition notice, we have issued an order to this particular registered person. From the books of accounts, we know that this gentleman is supposed to get money from you. So you don't pay the payment to this particular gentleman, rather you deposit that money into the government account. Look at the tarnishing activity. Look at the credibility which is getting destroyed, deteriorated by way of this garnishing provisions. Government offices go to the extent of writing a letter to your sundry data. Can they stop at that moment? No. They also go to your bank accounts. At the time of registration, which all bank accounts I have given for my registration, all those banks, the letter will be sent from the proper officer saying that, look, this gentleman is a defaulter. Look at the language. This gentleman is a defaulter. So the tax along with interest, along with penalty payable is this much. Kindly hold that money. Don't release that money to the assessee concerned. Now, this is how the recovery provisions are going to come into picture when there is a default. When there is a default, I repeat. So, what should I do the moment there is an order? Point number one, you admit, pay it off. Point number two, you don't admit, file a appeal against that particular thing. Now, appeal is a process where generally, it takes 2 years for me, to get away with this particular recovery provisions. So, friends, my he may require the proper officer to recover that money. Jay, are we connected? Mr. J, are we connected? Friends, there is a technical issue. Just give me a minute to resolve back. Yeah. Now, my recovery provisions, when it initiates, the proper officer says, the money what is due from you, it may be deducted. It may be deducted from where, if you're entitled for a refund, I'll hold back your refund and then the balance amount I'll pay you. Or the proper officer may request a specified officer, to deduct the amount so payable from any money owing to such person. Now, Sumit, your answer, the question what you've asked is slightly covered in this particular provision. Now, please understand, there could be a possibility that I have ought to get a refund. I'm ought to get a refund In the process of, then I'll pay you back the balance amount. I'll pay you back the balance amount. Now, examination. How does your examination question comes? Let me come back to my Excel file. Now, hope you're able to see my Excel file. First recovery provision, deduction from the amounts due. Now, say for financial year 17-18, there is a order passed on 13th July 2020, say for rupees 12 lakhs. Now, for the financial year 17-18, there is a refund entitled for rupees, say 15 lakhs. I have filed a refund application. Refund application filed and sanctioned. My refund application has been filed and it has been sanctioned on, say, financial year 17-18, 2 years I have a time limit. So as on, say, like 17-18, 18-19, 19-20. Now, assuming 15th September 2020, I get my refund application sanctioned. So the proper officer shall appropriate and pay. Now, I'm entitled for 15 lakhs. From that, 12 lakhs would be deducted and the 3 lakhs would be sanctioned to me as a refund. This 3 lakhs will be sanctioned to me as a refund. Now, this is something which we understand in terms of recovery. Now, I slightly change this provision this way. Refund application filed for VAT era. Now, this 17-18 is under GST. Now, look at the beauty. Sir, my refund of VAT has been sanctioned on 15th September 2020 for a sum of rupees 15 lakhs. The officer is supposed to recover from me 12 lakhs. Can the appropriation of VAT refund with GST order, can the appropriation happen? Answer is big yes. The officer concerned is a proper officer under VAT law, is also proper officer under GST law. That particular officer, before he is giving a refund to you, he can appropriate. He will say, look, I'm supposed to give money to you from VAT so much. You're supposed to pay to the GST so much. I have a right to appropriate these funds. My appropriation, recovery of tax happens even in this particular fashion. State laws, state funds get appropriated with the central funds. Now, this is one recovery mechanism which may be permissible under my section 78. Going further. So, who is a specified officer? Specified officer means officer of central government, state government, or union government, or a local authority, board, corporation, company owned wholly or partly under central government, state government, or union territory, or a local authority. Now look at the way the government has protected their interest. Government, if there is a money due, this money can be recovered by the central government officer, state government officer, or a local authority. Any money, whichever is possible, that can be appropriated is possible under section 79. So friends, first and foremost, when you talk about this particular appropriation, my appropriation can be done by any of these officers concerned. This is the first point you need to see. So, refund appropriation with the tax due. Sumit, your answer, ma'am. You have asked a question, when I pay back, should I pay with interest? Answer is yes. Slightly changing your question, Sumit. So what if I'm entitled for a refund? Will the officer appropriate my refund and then pay the balance amount? Answer to your question, yes. Next method of appropriation. Understand as a general language. This is all something which you can correlate with your common sense. To recover the amount by detaining and selling of goods. Now, this is a second aspect of recovery. First aspect, you are entitled for a refund, they have adjusted. So there is no refund. Detaining and selling of the goods belonging to such registered person. Belonging to such registered person. Now, the registered person has got some goods. Those goods were detained, they are put for auction. The money released out of auction was appropriated for recovery. Very, very dangerous provision. Very dangerous provision. What they say, they will come to the registered premises of the person. The registered premises of the person, if there are any goods, those goods will be detained, and those goods beyond a certain period of time will be put for an auction. Once the goods are put for an auction, whatever money is due, that money is recovered and then appropriation happens. Look at the mighty of the registered person. Auction is being done, and then the cost of auction is also recovered in this particular process. This is my second mode of recovery. Then, so what else can be done? Now, this particular recovery, put your common sense, put your thought process. In the state of Tamil Nadu, in the state of Maharashtra, in the state of Uttar Pradesh, 3 states I have obtained registration. I repeat, Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Tamil Nadu. I have registered in these 3 states. Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, there are no goods. It's only a temporary registration. No name, only name board is there. No desk, no computer, no stock. Entire material, entire goods are in the state of Tamil Nadu. Entire goods, entire stock is in the state of Tamil Nadu. My Maharashtra and Uttar Pradesh, it is only a name board, nothing is available. Assuming that there is a offense created in the state of Uttar Pradesh, assuming that there is a offense created in the state of Uttar Pradesh, can my officer of Uttar Pradesh write a letter to the officer of Tamil Nadu? Answer is a big yes. Answer is a big yes. My recovery proceedings in the state of Tamil Nadu can be initiated if the proper officer in Uttar Pradesh writes a letter to the Tamil Nadu officer. Now, this is called exchange of your communication for recovery proceedings. If a registered person does not respond in a particular state, they look for other states based on the PAN. The government officer, the moment he puts the PAN on the common portal, he gets to know which all states he has been registered. I repeat, the moment a PAN number is put onto the common portal, it throws out which all states you are registered. So the proper officer in Uttar Pradesh writes a letter to the officer in Tamil Nadu saying that, look, this gentleman has defaulted in the state of Uttar Pradesh. Kindly initiate the recovery provisions under section 79. Kindly initiate the recovery provisions under section 79 and get that money paid back to the state of Uttar Pradesh. So in Tamil Nadu, that proper officer, he will send the communication to the registered person in Tamil Nadu saying that, look, your branch in Uttar Pradesh has committed an offense. That offense, whatever was committed by you, that offense, I will make good by way of recovery of that money in the state of Tamil Nadu. This is my extended recovery provisions under 140, section 79. Next. Garnishing provisions. Look at the term they use is called garnishing. Now, this is a technical term. I would recommend you to understand this particular technical term as it is. Garnishing proceedings. Garnishing proceedings is a mechanism where the proper officer by giving a notice, require other person from whom money is due or money becomes due. I'll draw your attention to this particular language called money is due or money may become due, or a person who holds or may subsequently hold what? Money. Now, this provision of money due becoming due is your sundry debtors. So what is the difference between money due, money becoming due? When I've sold goods, 30 days is a credit period. Unless the 30 days gets over, money may not become due. Money may become due after a period of 30 days. This is your sundry debtors with a credit period. Next aspect is holds money or who may subsequently hold money. This is in relation to bank account. Money is already there in the bank account. Money comes into the bank account where he may hold that money. Holding money, bank, NBFC, or any of the other organizations which takes care of the financial transactions of the registered person. Now, a notice is given. A notice is given to whom all? Notice is given under garnishing provisions to the sundry debtor. To a sundry debtor. A notice is given to sundry debtor. Also, a notice is given to a bank. Look at the way this garnishing provisions go to recover money. So provision says, I'll issue a notice to the sundry debtor, don't pay this money to this registered person. The moment you receive this letter, from that day, whatever money you're supposed to pay to this gentleman, kindly deposit back into my government account. In the notice, they will clearly say, State GST Officer of Kerala, State GST Officer of Maharashtra or Haryana. They clearly mention this is a GST officer. This particular GST officer has issued a notice on this registered person. Let me come to my Excel file so that you will be easy to understand. Let me come back to my Excel file. Garnishing proceedings. Notice is served. Garnishing proceedings. When a notice is served from to on behalf of. Now, from will be the state or central GST officer. State or central GST officer. To, it will be either sundry debtor or banker of the taxable person. Now, this state or central GST officer says, look, I'm writing this letter to you as a sundry debtor. I'm writing this letter to you as a banker. Either of you have been holding the money of this particular person. Now, in case of sundry debtor, money is due or may be due. You are holding money or may hold money. Means, as of now, the account is zero. The moment money comes into account, a credit happens to account, you seize that money. Don't permit this taxable person to enjoy that particular money. Now, what does they say? This notice says, details of tax due along with other amounts. They will specify in detail tax interest penalty total. They'll give in detail what is the amount which is to be paid by this gentleman. There is a top and bottom. Yeah. Now, this is how the notice says. Look, tax, interest, penalty, all put together this much. Now, you as a customer, you as a banker, don't worry. I'm not going to burden you. Whatever money you are going to pay to this gentleman, kindly deposit into government account. They'll say in the name of central GST or state GST, your what you call DGSTO, circle, range. They give all the details and say, kindly deposit this money, kindly prepare a check or demand draft in this particular name and send that particular payment details to this particular government office. That is what they say in your garnishing proceedings. In your garnishing proceedings. Now, I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example to make you understand this particular garnishing provisions. Very important now. You as a business person, you have to honor the letter of the government officer. If you have defaulted or if you have not honored, you will be at risk. They'll say, what is your responsibility? Responsibility on these two people. Responsibility on these two people. Failing to honor the tax, the amounts to be paid to the government, it is the presumption that default is on sundry debtor or banker in addition to the taxable person. What it says, when you have defaulted in making the payment to government account, rather you paid it back to the sundry, your supplier, your taxable person. Having received this notice, banker has allowed this particular person to enjoy that money. Now, the moment banker is allowing this particular taxable person to enjoy that money, then the government notice is going to say, I presume that you people are also party to the offense, and I'll hold you responsible for that particular money. Friends, this is what is going to happen in relation to my garnishing provisions. So keep in mind, whenever there is a garnishing notice, this particular gentleman has to honor that particular amount. Now I'll give an example. Say there is a notice given to Mrs. ABC Limited stating that state GST officer has to recover a sum of rupees 13.8 lakhs, 9 lakhs as tax dues. This notice date of serving is on 13th July 2020. Now, taxable person, say Mr. Yes, X proprietor. Mr. X happens to be a proprietor. This particular letter was given to Mrs. ABC Limited. Now, ABC Limited owes rupees 2,85,000. Now, question comes here. Say 2,85,000 is the amount. My TDS I'll put it this way to make easy. Bill amount 2,85,000. TDS say 10%. For ease of understanding, I'm putting 10%. Net payable. Now, out of 2,85,000, this is my transactions now. Details of payment, advance, balance amount. Now, advance was paid on 13th July 2020. On 13th July, this company has paid, say, 25% advance or 20% advance. Now, this is the money which was paid as advance on 13th July. Now, look at the question. 13th July, service notice was given. 13th July, there was an advance paid for 57,000. Can this element of advance payment be challenged by the state GST officer? And can the allegation be drawn on Mrs. ABC Limited saying that you have violated the recovery proceedings under Section 79 in spite of giving garnishing proceedings, in spite of giving a notice not to pay any amount to your supplier? This amount should have been paid to the government. You have defaulted. So I will hold you as a party for this transaction. Can the officer bring that allegation on this particular entity called Mrs. ABC Limited? Now, answer, you cannot straight away say yes, straight away say no. You have to get into the details. Say, NEFT made on 13th July 2020, say at 11 a.m. Notice received on 13th July 2020 at 4 p.m. Look at the facts. I have made the payment in the morning at 11 a.m. In the evening 4 p.m. I have received this particular notice. This is the point where we will say the entity ABC Limited didn't had this notice received in due time for ensuring that the money should not be paid to Mr. X, rather it should be paid to the government. Accordingly, Mrs. ABC Limited shall not be held responsible for invocation of recovery proceedings under this particular law. This would be your answer. So friends, keep in mind, your answer depends on how you interpret these provisions, how you communicate the facts, how you draw your conclusion to state whether this entity is default or not in default. Let me come back to my presentation. Garnishing provisions. Now, it is going to specify if you have defaulted, you will be who is due or who who will be default at particular point in time, who has to pay that money back to the government. Now, the notice also says you are not responsible to pay the entire amount. What amount you have to pay to that particular taxable person, that amount you pay back. That is good enough. Now, the notice can be given to post office, banking company, or an insurance company. Now, look at the beauty. They are going to the insurance company also. Why? On the date of maturity, if a policy is getting matured, insurance company, instead of paying to that fellow, insurance company has to pay back to the government. Look at the way the thought process of the officer is working. They say post office, banking company, insurance company. Now, post office and banking company, this is a place where my fixed deposits and money is held. Insurance company, this is a point where any of the insurance is getting matured, any of the claim. The moment there is a claim, An insurance company has to pay that money to the insuree. That money, instead of you paying to the insuree, kindly pay it back to the government. Look at the way the recovery proceedings are going, the thought process is going to ensure the interest of public money. Friends, the tax due is nothing but the public money. Public money cannot let go as it is to the person. Next. Deeming provision. In case if there is a default on the person who has issued who has been issued with a notice, this gentleman, he fails to make the payment, then government says that fellow also will be added as a defaulter. His name will be added as a defaulter in the list along with that particular person, taxable person. This is the other extreme end. Now look at the way the tax officer first he thought, okay, is there any refund? If there is refund, recover from the refund. Second, by sale of the what you call the goods which are in the possession of the register person, the goods which are held in my inventory for the purpose of supply, those goods which are held in inventory, they're trying to liquidate that. So nothing is there. Third, they're sending a letter to bank, they're sending a letter to post office, they're sending a letter to the what is this gentleman sundry data. Nothing happened. Then they're going one step ahead called movable or immobile property. So no inventory is there. There is no money in the bank account. There is no customer who's owing anything to this company. Then they're coming to the next item called movable or immobile property. Now, I'll put it very simple. There is a lot of law which is involved. I'll come to this legal aspects of these aspects to make you understand. The proper officer will attach the immovable property or movable property. Now, attachment of immovable property. A notice is stick on the wall on the building of that particular property owned by this particular proper officer, this particular taxable person. They say once this building has been attached, no person has a right on that particular immovable property. The first right on that immovable property is vesting with the government officer. Now, can they ask the tenants to vacate? Can they ask the people who are working in that particular office to vacate? Generally, 30 days is a time limit given. 30 days is a time limit given. They would not invoke the provisions immediately to put it for auction. There is a due process of law which has to be followed. The judicial discipline of the law has to be followed. So what they will do, 30 days is the time limit they have given. In spite of giving 30 days, now there is a distrain. Distrain is a legal process, where I recover your goods, to make good of the amount due to me. Now, in case if I'm not able to get that money within a period of 30 days, they will initiate this process called putting for auction. All the technical fee, administrative fee, which is incurred in relation to sale of that particular movable or immovable property shall also be appropriated, and then the amount, if there is any surplus, that amount shall be paid back to your registered person. This is how my recovery proceedings under movable or immovable property happens, where there is a distrain, all the cost of distress. That means the cost incurred in relation to putting a newspaper advertisement, putting an auction, calling for bidding, getting the money deposited from the bidders, all the admin costs involved, etc. They will try to appropriate. Then later the money will be appropriated for the tax dues, then any other dues. Next. Recovery as arrears of land revenue. Now, so there is no movable property, there is no immovable property. What can I do? As if there is a recovery of this land revenue, they will write to the local authority saying that please, the proper officer will write to the collector of district saying that this gentleman, he is supposed to pay me money, he hasn't paid. Now, like if there is a property in any other state where this proper officer is not reachable, he will write to the local collector please appropriate this money as if there is a arrears of land revenue and make that good for the tax due. This is one thing which happens in case of your land revenue. Next, invocation of code of criminal procedures. I don't know whether it's right to name that particular person or not. For your understanding, I'll make this example clear this way. You would have seen in case of Geetanjali Jewelers, Nirav Modi. You could have seen in case of this Kingfisher, Vijay Mallya. Now, these are the people, please don't mistake me. I'm just giving an example to correlate the recovery proceedings. Now, when there is a recovery proceedings which are beyond the control of a tax officer, these are the people who are away in a foreign nation where only a court of law, by contempt of court, these persons can be brought back to the nation and the recovery proceedings can be initiated. Could be say example of your Satyam, where the management is within India. Example of your this Kingfisher. Example of Geetanjali Jewelers. All these are the examples where they invoke the provisions of CRPC, CPC, Code of Civil Procedure, CRPC, Code of Criminal Procedure. Now, this particular case, the proper officer writes a letter to the appropriate magistrate. Now, what is that? The management, the company, say the company is registered in Karnataka. In case of Kingfisher, the registered office is in the state of Karnataka. So the proper officer writes a letter to the magistrate of that particular place where this of what is it? In addition to your registered office, the management, where all management is located, the proper officer writes a letter to the magistrate saying that kindly invoke CRPC provisions to get that money cleared, to get that money paid for recovering the taxes due. Next. Invocation of a bond or an instrument. Now, this is a case where the other day we were talking about your provisional assessment. When I want to go for provisional assessment, I execute a bond. Along with the bond, they insist for a security. What is my security? Security is by way of a bank guarantee. Security is by way of a bank guarantee. This provision says, in case if the officer is not in a position to recover money, then whatever bond or security is there, invocate that particular security. Bank guarantee is always there. That bank guarantee will be invoked to recover money of tax dues which is not due. Now, any security which is there with the officer, which can be invoked, will be recovered, will be appropriated for the taxes due. Now, this is one important aspect. As I was giving example of Uttar Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra. If there is a offense which is conducted in any of these three states, the proper officer has a right to recover from any other state. Like example of Uttar Pradesh. If this offense caused in the state of Uttar Pradesh, and that offense, money has to be recovered in the state of Uttar Pradesh, assuming there is no assets available, then that particular scenario, my proper officer can write a letter to the proper officer in Tamil Nadu saying that, look, these are distinct persons. Since in Uttar Pradesh we fail to recover, we request you to initiate the proceedings in the state of Tamil Nadu, make good of the taxes, kindly remit it back to the state of Uttar Pradesh. Next principle called payment of taxes in installment. Payment of taxes in installment. There are a couple of network issues. Okay, there is one question from Ambika. Sir, is credit period given to debtors is considered for garnishing proceedings? A fantastic question, Ambika. Ambika is asking, the moment there is a notice given, can the credit period be considered? Now, the answer for that, The moment there is a garnishing proceedings, the vacation of credit period is gone. Means whatever 30 days, 45 days is there, government says nothing doing. Your credit period is set aside. The day you have received notice, it is deemed that you are due to pay back to the government on the same day. I repeat, the moment the garnishing notice is received, your credit period gets vacated. Means the same day, the moment you received your notice, the same day you're supposed to deposit that money with the government of India. Hope I've answered your question, Ambika. Let me see the next question. In between, there was some network issue. I do admit, friends. Thanks for giving an alert. Thanks for giving an alert and confirming. Sumit says, any officer can recover the money of any of that. Yes, Sumit. It is not compulsory that only a state officer, only a central officer can do that. It can be done by any of the officers, state officer, central officer, your local authority, your panchayat officer, your collector, magistrate, any of the officers can help the government in recovering money. Also, not only Sumit, all others who are listening to me, just keep in mind, whenever I say taxes due, what is that money? It's a public money. It's a government money. When I say government money, it is indirectly, it's a public money. When a public money is due, it is a duty of that particular government officer to go whatever extent it is possible, to get that money recovered. So all the officers have to support that particular state or central GST officer to recover that particular taxes. Answer is yes, Sumit. Next. Kirtana has asked one question. Can the amount due from the defaulter be recovered from the surety? Yes, Kirtana. This is the last resort they will do. Fantastically, Kirtana has brought in this aspect. Like there is something called surety, guarantee. Now, when a security is given, bank guarantee is generally given along with that particular thing. So in case of bank guarantee, that money will be recovered. So what if there is a third party who has given a surety? Now, in case there is a parent company, sister company, the sister company has defaulted, can a parent company come as a surety for that? Answer is yes. And can the invocation of proceedings to that parent company be done? Answer is a big yes, Kirtana. In case of Kingfish, sorry, not in King, this one, Geetanjali Jewelers, Kirtana, in case of Geetanjali Jewelers, this is one example we need to understand. There is a guarantee given by one of the parent company. When a guarantee is given from one of the parent company, in case there is a default from the local entity, that money was made good from the parent company, from the holding company, where the promise was given. So answer is yes, Kirtana. Sumit has further one more doubt. Garnishing proceedings means debtor to pay money directly to government. Full amount of invoice or only GST part? Okay. Sumit, whatever amount is due to that particular supplier, instead of paying to the supplier, now you have to pay the amount to the government. Now I gave my example, Sumit. Say 2,85,000 is the bill amount, 28,500 is my TDS amount. Assuming the TDS is already paid to government, the balance amount, what I'm supposed to pay to the supplier, that particular amount I have to pay back to my government India, government of central GST or state GST. Next. Department should concern about only GST amount, why whole amount to be deposited with government. Okay. Sumit, it is not GST amount alone. As I said again, government money means it's a public money. Whatever tax, interest, penalty is due, all that money should be recovered from that particular supplier. That's what your garnishing provisions say. Sumit says clear. Okay, I'll come back to my presentation now. This is one slide which talks about payment of taxes in installments. I'll come to my Excel file to make it clear for you. Section 80. I draw your attention, as a chartered accountant, how this can be used in your future. Now, this is something, one of the wise tax planning, one of the advisory which we have to give to the SSC in case if there is a default on payment of taxes. Default on payment of taxes. One exclusion, self-assessed tax. Now, this provision says your self-assessed tax is one provision. I am not going to give you exception for. I repeat, whenever you want to pay taxes on installment basis, whenever you want to pay taxes on installment basis, I will give you permission barring your self-assessed tax, So this is one thing you keep in mind. Now, so what do you mean by payment of tax in installments? Whenever there is a proper officer who did an audit and who has quantified taxes payable but not paid. Now, this is a scenario where a request could be made with commissioner. Now, why working capital issues? Lot of errors, improper accounting happened for a particular period. During that particular period, when a company was sailing through very difficult time. That is the point in time where this particular taxable person can write a letter. Taxable person write a letter to the commissioner. Why? He has to put forth the practical difficulty along with working capital issues. Now, once the application is given with the commissioner directs the concerned jurisdictional AC or DC to examine the financial position. Now, the range officer will call for your financial records. They'll examine your financial statements and then they will either approve or disapprove the particular application. Let me come back to my presentation. Now, this is a point in time where commissioner either will agree your application or disagree with your application. Once he is agreeing with your application, the commissioner is going to give 24 months, installments maximum within a period of 24 months. That is 2 years. So the commissioner is going to work out like EMI. What is the tax due? On that, what is the interest? So this particular amount is going to calculate month on month, maximum up to a period of 24 months. So the commissioner is going to communicate how this amounts to be paid back to the government. Now, please keep in mind, even one month, if there is a default, the provision says that it is presumed that you have defaulted. And the balance amount what to be paid shall become due on the day you have defaulted. Now, please keep in mind, this provision is one of the beneficial provision. This provision says, look, the commissioner is going to give you a permission to pay this tax in installments. If at all you have defaulted either of one of the EMI, one of the installment, then the commissioner is going to end your installments and the balance tax what you have to pay, you pay at one go. This is what the provision talks about by section 80. Next, transfer of property. This is one provision where it says a property cannot be transferred when the taxes are due. Like example, an order is served, within 3 months you have to pay the tax amount. The moment you receive an order, whatever properties are there, you have liquidated your property before the recovery provisions under section 79 have been initiated. That is a point in time this particular section 81 comes and says, I'll come to my Excel file to make you put this particular with an example. Now, say during financial year 2019-20, say there is a taxable person called Mrs. XYZ Limited. There is a taxable person called XYZ Limited. The proper officer conducted the audit for financial year 2017-18 and issued an order. Now, order serviced on, order was serviced on, say, 31st December 2019. 31st December 2019. Now, this financial year 1920, financial year 1920, there's one asset, one of the land and building sold for rupees 22 lakhs. Now, imagine two scenarios. Scenario 1, scenario 2. Date of sale, date of service of order. My order was serviced on 31st December 2019. Both the cases. Now, if sold the property on 15th September 2019, if I sold the property on 28th February 2020. Now, look at these two scenarios. Scenario 1, my order was received on 31st December. My order was received on 31st December. But on 15th September, prior to receipt of this notice, prior to receipt of order, sale of property happened. Now, can you call that it is a without authority of law? It is without knowledge of assessment proceeding and the corresponding outcome. Friends, on 15th September, when I'm selling my property, I don't know what is the outcome. My order is going to get, going to get concluded at a later point in time. On the day when I have decided to sell this particular property, I know that there is an order, when I financial year 17-18, there was an audit being conducted by the department, but I don't know what is the outcome. So with a good intention, I sold my property. So in this case, it wouldn't be called that you have violated your section 81. It wouldn't say you have violated your section 81. So answer for that is no invocation of provisions of section 81. Assessee did the sale of property with a good faith, with good intention. My recovery proceedings under section 79 and section 81 cannot be invoked. I put the conclusion. Recovery under section 79 and 81 cannot be invoked. That means whatever transaction happened, on the date of transaction, I know audit is being conducted, but I don't know the outcome. When everything was done in a good faith, this recovery proceedings shall not be applicable. Scenario 2, 28th February, I sold the property. Now look at this, 2 months from the date of service of an order, I sold the property. Now they say, illegal transfer without making good of the taxes due. Now, here I'm saying that the land and building was sold for 22 lakhs. Say the exposure of order, whatever the order they have given, tax, interest, penalty, all put together is due for rupees 15 lakhs. Now, what can be done? When I've sold the property for 22 lakhs on 28th February, they will say, as long as the taxes due are paid, the sale of property is not to be held as void under section 81. I repeat, when this particular gentleman, he sold property for 22 lakhs, and out of 22 lakhs, 15 lakhs was paid to the government of India. Then they say, look, whatever property I have sold, for the purpose of payment of taxes, I do honor your genuineness. Rather, you sold the property, you kept that 20 lakhs for you, and you have defaulted to pay that money to government. Then they say this transaction is null and void. On the date of sale, there was a knowledge of the money due to the government. So there will be a first charge to government for taxes. Then the rest will be to the recipient. So here what happens, whatever the 22 lakhs has come, first and foremost, the 22 lakhs should be paid to government for the tax loss of 15 lakhs. The rest 7 lakhs can be enjoyed by this person for whatever be the reason. This is what we need to understand when we read my section 81. Let me come back to my presentation now. Let me come back to my presentation. Yes. So this provision says, by way of a sale, mortgage, or exchange or anything in favor of any other person cannot be done as long as there are taxes due. Now, if that is done, it is presumed that there is a defrauding of the government revenue. It is an assumption. As long as the taxes are not paid, the first charge is to the government. The balance amount, it can be paid to the third person. Sir, it will not be void. It will not be void if there is a property made for adequate. Like example, 22 lakhs I have sold, 15 lakhs is what I am going to pay back to the government. Then they say it is not to be void. Also, if it is sold with a good faith, the first scenario, I've sold on 15th September. I don't know what is going to happen on 31st December. This is what my provisions say. Next. Provisional attachment. Now, to protect, like now this is one particular provision, like I would say, misutilization of the government officer's authority. Now, this is one provision which is not a user-friendly, taxpayer-friendly provision. Now, this is one of the draconian provision under the GST law. What it says, there is a provisional attachment. Now, section 83 says to protect the interest of revenue, where all the government officer feels that I feel the taxes are not to be paid, the assessee may run away, where a proceedings under section 62 non-filer case, section 73 unregistered, section 64 summary assessment, then your section 67 inspection, search and seizure, 73, 74, what we read yesterday. All these are the cases where the commissioner, if he is satisfied, in writing, they do the attachment of any of your property. Now, what will happen? Attachment includes your bank account or any other accounts where your money is held. This provision says, wherever the government officer has a doubt to believe, has a fear that the government money is going to get stuck, then they can do a provisional attachment. Next is your recovery proceedings. Now, this is the last slide of our demand and recovery. This particular continuation validation, in simple terms, it says, whenever there is an appeal, like there is an order which is given, this order was challenged in a higher forum. So the order was given by a joint commissioner. This order was challenged before commissioner. Once commissioner has reduced the tax liability, the balance tax due should continue. This provision says, wherever at a higher forum, could it be a commissioner, tribunal, high court, supreme court, when the provisions are challenged, to the extent the provisions are challenged, to the extent the tax exposure has reduced, to that extent, your tax liability gets waived off. The balance tax liability stands hold good. So what if I get a favorable decision? Then they say none of the recovery provisions will be continued. It shall drop to that extent. That is what it says in relation to my continuation or validation of provisions. Friends, we come to the end of demand and recovery provisions. Let us start with another provision, another aspect for our discussion. We have the next topic to discuss. Let me come back to my presentation. Just give me a minute. Just give me a minute. Yeah. The next topic in line for our today's discussion, the next topic in line for our today's discussion is your offenses and penalties. Offenses and penalties. Now, this is the next topic which we are going to discuss today. It is one of the most watchful provision. Examination, you're going to get 5 marks question from this topic called offenses and penalties. I'll give you a background. I'll give you a background. We will have a break for 5 minutes and then we'll continue on this thing. Offenses and penalties. This particular topic, we will understand what all sort of offenses are there and what are the penalty which can be invoked under GST law. To understand this provisions better, I'll put it in simple language this way. Now, you go to a doctor for getting a redressal on any of your health issues. So you say, doctor, I'm not getting a proper sleep. Then doctor is going to give you couple of tips. Doctor says, you have your food in timely manner. You ensure that you don't watch your mobile, you don't watch TV when you're going to sleep. Doctor says, read at least 1 hour in a day, read at least half an hour before you sleep. Walk at least for 2 hours. Now, what are all these things? These are tips. That means the doctor is going to indicate if you do these things, you will not have the issue called improper sleep. The same way, this topic is going to talk to us what are all offenses are there under GST law. For each of those offenses, what is the penalty there for us under the GST law? Having understood, once I know these are the offenses, you as a chartered accountant, you as a tax consultant, when you give a proper advice to your client, you take care of these particular provisions. You are taken care from the legal non-compliances. I repeat, if you know that these are the non-compliances, you try to ensure that you have taken care of non-compliances, then no way there will be an offense, no way invocation of penalty can happen. So in nutshell, knowledge of these offenses and penalties is good enough for us to have a better compliance. So friends, in this particular topic, we will understand what are the nature of offenses. For each of those offenses, what are the penalties available? Now, penalty, is it a specific penalty or a general penalty? We will understand the nature of penalty. We will understand what are the natural and judicial disciplines in relation to penalty. When the penalty provisions are invoked, what are the general disciplines the proper officer has to follow? What are the vested powers to invoke that, impose or waive the penalty? There could be a scenario where there is a derogative power. There is a derogative power with the officer consent to waive off a penalty. Confiscation. What do you understand by the term confiscation? E-way bill provisions. When there is a contravention, what are the provisions dealing with my e-way bill provisions? Liability of officers and certain other persons. Cognizance of offense and compounding of an offense. This slide, cognizance of an offense. This is one slide. This is one slide. I would recommend wait for that slide and understand very, very carefully these offenses. Finally, we will have we will recap all these provisions which are important from our examination point of view. Friends, I will call for a 10 minutes break over here. We are at 8:37. Let us resume back at 8:45 to 8:47. So let us have a 10 minutes break and let us resume back for our discussion. Hope you're able to see my Excel file, my presentation. Let me hear from the confirmation, then I'll go ahead. Jay, is my presentation visible? Okay. Yes, friends. So we'll continue with our discussion on today's topic called offenses and penalty. Offenses and penalty. So this particular topic we have discussed, we have understood what is expected from this particular topic is understand the overall non-compliances, understand for each of those offense, what would be the penalty which is applicable. What would be the penalty which is applicable? This is the crux of our understanding for today's discussion. To start with, principles of jurisprudence. Principles of jurisprudence. This particular jurisprudence says penalty has not been defined under GST law. I repeat, the term penalty has not been defined under my GST law. But this penalty is nothing but a punishment or deprivation of any activity. My term punishment, the penalty means it's a punishment or it's a deprivation of an activity. Example, when there is a punishment, they will say you are not permitted to file your GST. You are not permitted to generate e-way bill. It's a deprivation of your activity. Or a punishment where money has to be paid for the offense. Now, this particular punishment is given by the statute by way of either quantification of money or in terms of an activity. This is what you need to understand. Whenever we refer to this term called punishment, my punishment could be either by way of monetary terms or restricting you from doing an activity or from your responsibility. So this is how my penalty should be understood when we talk from the principles of jurisprudence. This is not defined under my GST law. Prosecution. Now, this is another term which talks about a scenario or a mechanism where there is an institutional commencement of a legal proceeding. How? By placing on record the formal charges against the offender. Right? Now, they invoke the provisions of 198 of CRPC provisions. This particular mechanism says, whenever there is an offense which is to be looked from the provisions of CRPC, Code of Civil Procedure, Code of Criminal Procedure. So either of these two provisions, a prosecution can be done. Generally, we refer to CRPC provisions. Next, equality before law, quantification of penalty on the basis of intent of the person. Now, this is one thing we need to keep in mind. I draw your attention as a professional to look at this language called intent of the person. Now, this intent of the person is something which is going to determine whether there was a culpable, whether the offense has been done in a state of mind with a culpable notion. Was there a state of understanding? Was your mind prepared for doing that particular offense? If the offense was intentional in nature, yes, you will be punishable. If we can demonstrate that this offense is not an intentional, then we can take a plea to take a derogative authority of law where please try to waive off this penalty. Now, this is one of the important aspects of our judicial discipline. When we talk about law, principles of judicial discipline, they say, is it a generic provision to levy a penalty? Is it a specific provision? That is what the high courts or Supreme Courts look in when the penalty provisions are invoked. Fraud, misrepresentation, suppression of the facts vis-a-vis non-fraudster. Now, we have discussed at length yesterday how the department can identify that this particular act of you has been done fraudulently, has been done with a misrepresent intention to misrepresent or for suppression of facts. Then bailable offense versus non-bailable offense. Cognizable, non-cognizable. Now, serious offense, non-serious offense. Now, for us to cover in this chapter 19, there are these 16 sections, 122 to 138, which we have to understand. Now, each section, what is there in for us to understand, I have just captured over here. Now, these are all the topics which we are going to have a discussion in today's class and tomorrow evening session. So this entire 122 to 138 we are going to cover in these 2 days session. To start with, when we talk about this jurisdictional authority, the state officer, the central officer, both of them have the same identical provisions. My provisions of central GST law or state GST law are imbibed, borrowed into section 20 of IGST Act. People who doesn't have knowledge of GST law, people who have not experienced or exposed to GST indirect taxation, just keep in mind, my CGST Act, my SGST Act is voluminous, it is lengthy. All the sections are there in my CGST Act and SGST Act. IGST Act does not have so much of lengthy provisions. All provisions which are there under your CGST or SGST are blindly copied into my IGST Act by virtue of section 20. Now, if you see, under central GST, there are around 175 sections as of today. I repeat, under CGST, there are 175 sections as of today. If you look into my IGST law, hardly there are 20 to 25 sections. Now, what it says, all the provisions what are there in central GST or state GST are equally applicable in my IGST law. That's what the importance of section 20. Now, penalty once quantified under state law or central law, it is equally quantified under the other law. Now, couple of things for us to start with before we start with our discussion. First definition called conveyance. A conveyance includes a vessel, aircraft, a vehicle. Vessel in case of goods which are carried through your sea. Aircraft, which flies in air to transport your goods. Vehicle, which is on a road mode of transportation. So all the three modes, vessel, aircraft, vehicle, are included in the definition called conveyance. A proper officer means a person in relation to a function to be performed under this act, means a commissioner or an officer of central GST, central tax, who is assigned that power by the commissioner. So any person under the GST law who has been authorized by commissioner can be called as a proper officer. Registered person, a person who is registered under GST law, registered person. Taxable person, at length we have discussed many occasions, who is a taxable person. Person who is registered or liable to be registered. Now, let us start with our section 122. Let us start with our section 122. Before I go further, let me see if there are any doubts. If there are any doubts, there's one question from Sumit. Sumit says, initiation of legal proceedings means prosecution. Yes, Sumit. Yes. Legal proceeding, prosecution. Now, I would say this way, Sumit. There is an order, there is a offense which has been confirmed. There is an offense which has been confirmed. Now, that particular offense which has been confirmed on a particular person, there are penal provisions which have to be done. The penal provisions, one of them is your legal prosecution. Prosecution means taking on oath before a person is imprisoned for a particular term of period. I was drawing your attention to section 132. Where a offense which is having a value more than 5 crores, my imprisonment is for a period of 5 years. A offense which is exceeding 2 crore but less than 5 crore, my imprisonment is for 3 years. So when I refer to this term, legal proceedings, This is in relation to your prosecution, where the person should be presented before the magistrate. The magistrate takes the person on oath, confirming you have done an offense. So for this offense, this is a law where you will be put behind the bars for a period of 3 years, for a period of 5 years. Prosecution, where invocation of CRPC provisions or invocation of CPC provisions, Code of Criminal Procedure, Code of Civil Procedure. So before your arrest, the legal prosecution starts. This is the importance for us to understand, Sumit. Coming back to our presentation, this section 122 talks about offenses. First, my entire section 122, for your ease of understanding, I have captured 4 buckets. First element called procedural lapse. Second offense called fraud, suppression of facts. Third element called registration. Fourth element called non-payment of taxes. Right? Now, entire these offenses, friends, I have put into 4 buckets. Bucket number 1, which talks about your procedural lapses. Bucket number 2, which talks about your fraud, suppression, willful misstatement. Third talks about your registration. Fourth talks about your non-payment of tax. Now, my entire section 122, there are around 21 offenses. All those 21 offenses are put into these particular 4 brackets. Examination, why I'm making putting across this, for you in your examination, if you can correlate with these particular 4 buckets, it will be easy for you to understand. To start with, where a taxable person who supplies any goods or services or both without issuing of an invoice, or issues an incorrect or false invoice. Now, first offense to start with, I don't issue an invoice, or I issue an invoice with the incorrect or false data. What is that incorrect or false data? GST number, you should have given your GST number. You have given some other GST number. Incorrect data. You have to mention value of supply of goods for 10 units, but you have given a bill for 5 units. Incorrect or false invoice. Or I've supplied the goods without issuing an invoice. Now, this is a case where we say, sir, the moment I issue invoice, I need to pay taxes. I don't want to pay taxes. That is the reason I don't want to issue invoice. This could be one example of your 122, where my invoice was issued, incorrectly, or I supplied without issuance of invoice. Now, this point number 1, is it procedural? Is it intent to evade payment of tax? Is it registration? Is it non-payment of taxes? I could call this is fraudulent activity. Why? There was a culpable offense. There was a stage of mind where you have an intention to evade payment of taxes. Second, issues an invoice or a bill without supply of goods. Now, this is another offense. Again, I put this in a bucket called a cheating or fraud. I have issued an invoice without actually supply of goods or services. Now, this I call as a fraudulent activity. Why? You have an intention to evade payment of tax. That is called your second offense. Third offense, collects any amount but as tax, but fails to pay the tax to the government beyond a period of 3 months from the date on which such payment becomes due. You remember section 76? My section 76 talks about money collected but not paid to the government. Now, for that, section 76 is a recovery provision. Friends, just be with me in this particular point. I'll give you the background how this drafting is happening. As a student, you read for your examination. So what is beyond that? You prosper in your career, you prosper in your profession, you have to reach new heights. Have you ever imagined how the draftsmen, how the tax laws are drafted, how these provisions are drafted? All these provisions are drafted by people like you and me over a period of time. Once we get a perfection in this knowledge, we get a expertise in this particular area. Look at the provision. This section 122 says that, look, if you've done an offense, what is your penalty? My section 76 talks about recovery. There's a person who has collected the tax but not paid. So 76 is recover that money. Assuming I'm a tax officer, I was given an instruction to recover money from the person who is supposed to pay the tax. So should I recover only tax? Should I recover interest? Should I recover penalty? Answer to that question is covered in section 122. Section 122 says that, look, if there is an offense, that should be penalized. Now, if you look at 76, they say tax with penalty. Sir, how much is my penalty? 100% of tax. That is what discussed in point number 3. I would call this again a fraudulent activity. You have collected an amount of tax, but you have failed to pay that amount to the government. How? Beyond a period of 3 months. Sir, what if I have paid within a period of 1 month? Then section 122 is not applicable. Section 122 is applicable only when the tax is not paid beyond a period of 3 months. Now comes your legal advisor from you who is reading these provisions. Sir, what if 2 months the money was with me? I've I have received in my bank account money in the month of January. My return for Jan should be filed on February. February, March, 2 months, I didn't pay my returns. March, somewhere in April, I filed my returns. This provision says beyond a period of 3 months. Before that period of 3 months, I have filed my return. Can the penalty be recovered is a question which you have to put forth before the government officer, before the proper officer. If I'm too technical, let me put this very simple. Let me take it to Excel file. I'll make it simple in my Excel file. Now, section 76 talks about recovery of taxes collected and not paid. Section 76 talks about a scenario where taxes to be recovered, where taxes were collected but not paid. Recovery for under section 76, tax, interest, penalty. Now, what is the amount? What is the provision? My amount, tax collected. Interest from the due date till actual payment. Penalty equivalent to tax. Now, tax collected but not paid, section 12 or 13 read with section 31, section 7, section 9. Now, please understand why I'm putting all these things. If you are one of them who want to excel in your profession, you want to get into this drafting of tax laws, this is how you compare the provisions to collectively to see how to argue before the court of law. Also you bring awareness in the thought process. Now, interest, this is recovered as per section 50. My penalty, penalty, can it be automatic or directive? I repeat my question. Sir, can my penalty be automatic or should it be directive? Answer to this question, friends. Answer to this question. My penalty is always directive. It cannot be automatic. Unless otherwise, somewhere a direction is given, penalty cannot be levied. Now here, section 122 talks about my penalty. Now here, this is my basic understanding of section 76. Here, for my penalty, I need to refer to section 122. Section 122 talks about penalty. Now, I'll put an example here. Particulars, amount, supply on advance receipt during Jan 2021. I'll make it simple, say December, for ease of our discussion. December 2020, December 2020, I have received some money as an advance. December 2020, I have received some money as an advance. This money I'm supposed to pay tax. Now, say I have received a sum of rupees 10 lakh. Now, what is the due date? The due date for December is 20th Jan 21. Now, actual date of payment. Say my actual date of payment, instead of paying on January, say Feb 28th I have paid. 28th February 21 I have paid that. Now, what is the gap? My January to February, my due date is January, I paid on February. My gap is less than 3 months. My gap is less than 3 months. So friends, in this case, what can be recovered under section 20, recovery under section 76? My tax, assuming 18% tax, interest under section 50. Due date till date of payment. Now, the gap between these two dates is, say 11 days plus 28 days, say 39 days. So what I'll do, 1,80,000 into 18% into 39 days divided by 365 interest. Penalty under section 122. I would say nil. Why? My provisions say penalty is applicable if the tax is outstanding for a period of 3 months. Now, this is how I need to interpret my provisions of 122 in an examination for solving a problem. Friends, please keep in mind, reading the provisions for your examination is something which is important. Let me come back to my presentation. Now, this provision which talks about your section 122, third clause, it says, if there is a failure to pay beyond a period of 3 months, if there is a failure to pay beyond a period of 3 months, my penal provisions can be invoked. Point number four, collects any tax in contravention of the provisions of this act, but fails to pay the same to the government beyond a period of 3 months. Now, point number 3, collection of a tax. Point number 4, that the collection of tax is in contravention of the provisions of this act. How? You are a registered person, your registration is cancelled under section 29. I repeat, you are a registered person under the GST law. Under section 29, your registration has been cancelled. Why, sir? Why my registration is cancelled? You have done any of the offense your registration was cancelled by the department officer. Now, in case you have collected a tax, though you are not supposed to collect, because your registration has been cancelled, that is a point in time offense can be invoked under this particular section 122. Next, fails to deduct tax under section 51, or deducts an amount less than what to be deducted, or where he fails to pay to the government. This provision talks about your procedural lapses. You have deducted, but you failed to pay. You have deducted less than what you are supposed to deduct. Sixth point is TCS. You have failed to collect the tax. You have collected an amount less than what to be collected, or you have failed to register itself. Any of these provisions, they say again it is an offense. takes or utilizes input tax credit without actual receipt of goods or services. This is one serious offense from the GST law. This is one serious offense from the GST law. What they say, this particular provision says takes or utilize input tax credit. How? Without actual receipt of goods or services. Without actual receipt of goods or services, either fully or partially in contravention of the provisions. I'll draw your attention for this particular point. Again, I draw your attention to your auditing. I draw your attention to your responsibility as an auditor under the GST law. You're doing the watching of your purchases. Now, when you do the watching of your purchases, it is not blindly verifying the bill, verifying the supporting document. Rather, when you verify a bill, my bill says there is a receipt of 100 kgs of some component. How do you actually ensure that 100 kgs are received into the factory premises? So there is a security seal. Security seal, does it alone say that those 100 kgs were received? Reason, unless you update your inventory, I cannot say that 100 kgs of raw material were actually received. I repeat, when you're doing the audit, when you talk about receipt of goods, those 100 kgs should have been received, should have been accounted in inventory, should have been consumed. This is what is expected for us to verify. So if at all you have accounted for a receipt of goods, you have accounted for a receipt of services which are actually not, you have availed a credit which were actually not received, then they say it is a serious offense. Next, you're fraudulently obtaining a refund. Now, there are various ways where you can obtain a refund. You say that, look, I received money in foreign currency. You have given a FARC, which is actually not a genuine. Say someone has printed a bank document, which is a fudge document. I draw your attention, travel in time back to Satyam saga. In relation to Satyam, when the fraud was detected, this company has given a bank statement which itself is a fraudulent, fictitious statement. They shown fixed deposits in a bank which really didn't existed. Auditor haven't confirmed as external evidence what is the bank statement, what is the balance in the fixed deposits as on a reporting date. So that is one important aspect called fraudulently obtaining a refund. You do any of the mischief to get that money as a refund. Later, once it is established, then you will be punishable under this particular section. Takes or distributes input tax credit under section 20. There's a concept called input service distributor. In case if there is any mechanism where you have claimed a credit which is not there, or you have passed on a credit which is more than what should have been passed on, then again, this I call as a procedural lacuna. Falsifies and substitutes financial records or produces fake accounts or documents, or furnishes any false information with an intent to evade payment of tax. Now, this is what happens. This is what happens where generally the books of accounts are incorrect. The books of accounts are incorrect. When someone has given the books of accounts, which is knowingly that it is a fake records, it is fictitious records, that is called a offense which is punishable under this law. The person is liable to be registered but fails to obtain registration. Taxable person. When we talk about registration, there was a suo motu voluntary registration. There is registration by the officer concerned. That is the point where they're saying. If there is a taxable person who is supposed to register but not registered, it is an offense. While getting a registration, you gave a false information. Again, this is a punishable offense. There is an obstruction or preventing an officer from performing his duty. Again, it is an offense. Transports any taxable goods without the cover of a document. Now, this is one scenario where they say you're transporting the goods, e-waybill is something which is required. Now, one e-waybill is required, second, a tax invoice is required. If it is on account of supply, tax invoice will be issued. So what if it is not on account of supply? A delivery challan is required. So in case if there is a movement of taxable goods, either a tax invoice or delivery challan has to be issued. I don't issue either of these two documents, or I don't have an e-waybill. then that is a punishable offense under this particular provision. Suppression of turnover leading to evasion of tax. Now, what do you mean by suppression of turnover? Friends, I draw your attention. Yesterday we had one example discussed. In the month of February, the accountant has accounted a transaction for 1,50,000. But actually, money came into bank account for 1,80,000. Now, you as an auditor, when you have gone for year-end audit, you say, gentlemen, you received 1,80,000 in your bank account. You have issued only an invoice for 1,50,000. That 30,000 which was short reported, that 30,000 which is short reported shall be called as your suppression of turnover. Next, fails to keep or maintain retained books of accounts in accordance with the provisions. Now, you cannot make your client run away showing all these provisions, but you can educate your client. You can educate yourself. Look, when I have registered, the law has conferred on me with some duties and responsibilities. My law says I have to maintain some records. If you recollect, section 35, read with rule 56, we have discussed various records or books of accounts to be maintained. If the assessee fails to maintain those books of accounts in the given specified format, then again it is a punishable offense. I'll give one example. As per the law, whenever there is an advance paid to my supplier is not registered under GST law. I need to issue something called advance voucher. Under the GST law, my voucher should be having a name called advance voucher. If I don't maintain, again it is a punishable offense. This is one particular aspect we need to keep in mind with respect to your non-maintenance of books of accounts. Next. Fails to furnish information or documents called by an officer. Now, this is the important aspect where the brainy persons come into picture. The intelligence, the investigation, summons, what we have discussed yesterday, section 70. This is something which comes into picture. Fails to furnish information or documents when it was called by an officer. How? As per the accordance of the provisions of this law. Or he frames or he furnishes false information or documents. Now, as I draw your attention, investigation, field work, review on field. Officer, when he goes for review of some data, this particular officer, he will call for some information. Like it may not be straight from the registered person, it could be from the supplier, it could be from the customer, it could be from the banker. Summons, section 70. The vigilance officer who is calling for summons, he will try to obtain some information to determine the person whether he has paid taxes or not. In the process of that, when an information is called for and you fail to produce that information, then again it is a punishable offense. Supplies or transports or supplies, transports or stores any goods which he has a reason to believe are liable for confiscation. Now look at the three languages they used. In the language they have used one, you're supplying the goods, you're transporting the goods, or you're storing the goods. How? You're doing any of these three activities where you have a reason to believe, that these are liable for confiscation. So what do you mean by liable for confiscation? They are all smuggled goods. They are illegal products. Those goods have been obtained by beyond the law, which is a known act called smuggling. I'll give an example. Storing of gold beyond a threshold limit, beyond a permissible limit. You know that this is without authority of law. There is no bill, there is no voucher, there is no one who can support you that this particular jewelry or this particular gold has been obtained with a genuine way. So you are making a supply, having known that it is a smuggled goods, you are making a supply, then you will be called party to a offense. Transporter. Now, most of the transportation cases, transporters take a responsibility. Say, don't worry, I will take care of the legal compliances. I'll take care of the check post officers. The transporter knows these goods are not genuine. Those are all uh, unlawful, illegal goods or storage. There is a person who is having a warehouse, the person who is having a godown is storing the goods, having a knowledge that these are not a lawful goods. Now, that is something which is again a punishable offense. Issues an invoice or document using a registration number of another person. This is what I was telling. When you are issuing an invoice, your registration is cancelled. Now, customer wants a bill on which tax invoice with the GST number is required. Customer doesn't know you are the owner or someone else is owner. Assuming you run a shop in Sokarpet, in Morpet, I'm talking in Chennai, Tamil Nadu. In Tamil Nadu, there is a place called Morpet, Sokarpeta. I happen to run the business without any fear where I depend on the GST number of another person. Now, this is what is again a punishable offense. Now, when you are giving a bill, it should have your GST number. It should not have any other person's GST number. Now, couple of cases, the intelligence, the vigilance have come to know that left and right, the people are using the GST number of another person who is regular in filing of returns. Unfortunately, the honest taxpayer is getting suffering because of some other dishonest taxpayers. Tampers with or destroys material evidence of document. Now, in the process of audit, in the process of search, inspection, you try to destroy an evidence, you try to tamper an evidence, it is also a punishable offense. The last but not the least, disposes or tampers with any of the goods that have been detained, seized, or attached. You try to play around with those particular goods which have been detained, which have been kept in the custody of the officer concerned. Now, if any of these 21 listed cases are there, then what it says, penalty shall be higher of 10,000 or amount equivalent any of the following: tax evaded or tax did. Okay. Now, penalty it will be either of higher of 10,000 or tax. Now, when you see this particular slide, can someone help me? What does that come into your picture? Higher of 10,000 or tax. Can someone help me? What comes into mind when you see these two? We have covered this thing. Higher of 10,000 or tax involved. Where we have come across this? Any idea? You can put into the question window, ma. Yes, it is covered under section 73. Yes, Deepak. Sumit has one question here. Intention of taxable person is not to pay taxes to government is confirmed after 3 months. I think there are a couple of questions which I have skipped. Let me go back to those questions. I think a couple of questions I skipped over here. Okay, there's a question from Sumit. Is summon and prosecution both are same? Sumit is asking a question. Is summons and prosecution both are one and the same? Intention of taxable person is not to pay taxes to government is confirmed after 3 months. Okay, I'll answer your question. Prosecution or summons? Yes, Anjali, you are right, ma. Anjali answers that other than fraud, misstatement, section 73, 9, where we have read yesterday. You are right, Anjali. To answer to Sumit's question, Sumit says, what is the difference between summons and prosecution? Sumit, my prosecution is a process of confirming the provisions of CRPC or CPC with respect to your putting behind the bars. Summons is one step prior to that. Now, before undertaking the prosecution, before invoking CRPC provisions, summons will be called for. I'll put it this way for ease of understanding. People are listening to me. People are listening to me. How summons is linked with my prosecution and other provisions. A tax officer, when he wants to create a charge, I repeat, a tax officer, when he wants to create a charge, an allegation that has to be with evidence. Without evidence, no charge can be created by none of the tax officers. For the simple reason, you go to the court of law, without evidence, nothing can be done. You would have seen many movies. Without an evidence, the judge is he's hell bent on giving his judgment to confirm that there is a offense which is created. Similarly, for any tax officer to issue a show cause notice to confirm an order, evidence is required. Now, there are a couple of evidences which are punishable under CRPC or CPC provisions, where my provisions of section 132, where more than 2 crore, more than 5 crore, more than 2 crores, more than 5 crore. If there is an offense which is called a serious offense, now to confirm that particular offense, first and foremost, they will take the evidences on record. They will not issue a show cause notice. They will call for summons. Means they will say, you come and represent before me at this particular point in time. They will come and make them present with the specified documents. Summons is a process where the officer collects the evidences, collects the details of tax which was collected but not paid. All those evidences collected together, they issue a notice. Wherein the provisions of GST law with respect to collection of tax, interest, penalty shall be done. Also, they want to give a little more rigorous imprisonment not to do that particular offense, where my provisions of CRPC, criminal code of conduct, CRPC provisions will be called for. Those provisions were putting behind the bars, putting into the jail. Now, putting into the jail, it is not under the purview of central GST officer or state GST officer. This is purely covered under my CPC or CRPC provisions. Those we are not discussing as a part of our curriculum. Now, putting someone into the jail is a process where a magistrate, like Supreme Court, High Court, Sessions Court called magistrate. In my Sessions Court, there will be a judge called magistrate. This person will be presented before magistrate before invocation of your prosecution under CRPC provisions. What do you mean by putting them behind the bars? Summons is a process. I collect the evidence. I take him on oath that this offense was conducted by this particular assessee, taxable person. If the tax evasion is very high enough, the tax department wants to showcase to the others, look, I'm going to punish you. Punishment beyond a particular offense. I take a CRPC provisions. That is what they are trying to put across here. In case of my prosecution, so summons is just to collect evidence. Prosecution where invocation of CRPC provisions. Coming back, Deepak and Ambika, yes, ma, you both are right. Invocation of this particular, when you see this line, it is nothing but section 73, subsection 9. Penalty can be levied where intent of fraud, etc., does not appear. Coming back, my penalty under section 122 says 10,000 or amount of tax to be tax evaded, tax not deducted, tax not collected, or input tax credit availed or passed on or distribution irregularly. Input tax credit availed of or passed on or distributed irregularly for ISD. So in simple terms, this provision talks about your section 73 where 10,000 or tax evaded. In case of TDS, TCS, to the extent of tax not deducted or short deducted, whichever is higher, that shall be the penalty. Or refund claim, which is fraudulently. Now, section 122, subsection 2. A registered person who supplies any goods or services or both, or on which tax has not been paid, short paid, erroneously refunded, or wrongful availment. Now, if you recollect these four language, 1, 2, 3, 4, this is a language. This is a language which we have used, in our what you call allegation, section 73, section 74, section 73, section 74. My allegations of section 73 and 74 where this tax not paid, short paid, erroneous refund, wrong availment or utilization. This is what is being referred to see how to quantify your penalty. Friends, this is one slide which talks about your penalty. Now, this particular slide says, now, when you issue a show cause notice under section 73 or 74, you know that tax to be collected, you know that penalty to be collected. But at the same time, you should also know that this particular recovery is happening under 73 or under 74. If it is under 73, then this particular provisions are applicable. Let me select a color. Yeah. If it is under section 73, 10% or tax due, whichever is higher. If it is under 73. If it is under 74, 10,000 or tax due, whichever is higher. My penalty equivalent to the tax under 74. Under 73, rupees 10,000 or 10% of the tax due. Look at the language, 10% of the tax due. 10% of the tax due. Here, 100% of the tax. Under section 73, either 10,000 or 10% of the tax due. Under section 74, 10,000 or 100% of the tax due. This is what we need to keep in mind. So what do you understand? When an officer has to issue a notice, he has to issue notice, understanding the provisions of section 73, section 74. 73, 74 does not talk about penalty straight away. 73, 74 does not talk about penalty straight away. 73, 74 draws attention to penalty. That penalty is invoked from section 122. So 122 gives me a guidance. If I fail to satisfy this section 122, no penalty. This is what you need to keep in mind with respect to my penal provisions. Next, moving further. 122 subsection 3. Now, this is one important provision. I will explain the background before we listen to this particular slide. If you recollect, there are tax frauds which are coming in the newspapers. There is a tax fraud which is being reported in the newspaper. One genuine case, when we read through, a chartered accountant was, his name was also put into the charge sheet for one of the reasons, saying that he is also party to that particular offense. What was the mistake happened? The chartered accountant filed the returns on the basis of information provided by the client. I repeat, a professional. When you are taking a role of advisory thing, your role is only to advise, not to get into any of the malified or unlawful activities. You have to know the boundaries of your professional jurisdiction. You can act within the four corners of your professional jurisdiction where you are permitted to advise. You cannot take a responsibility on your shoulders belonging to the assessee, belonging to the registered person. Could it be a non-compliance under ROC, income tax, or indirect tax? Just because returns are uploaded by the professional, I repeat, just because returns are uploaded by the professional, can that professional be held responsible? Answer would be, you should ensure what is your role. You just associated with them for filing of returns. I don't know. I have not got into the detailed transactions. I did a GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. I don't own that particular information. The information was provided by the client to me. That information was uploaded. So I'm not a party to this particular thing. Now, section 122, subsection 3 talks about a penalty on any person. Look at the language. A penalty on any person. The most draconian and dangerous provisions. A person who aids or abets, a person who's helping language use, a person who aids or abets. The meaning of this is a person who's encouraging, a person who's supporting any of the offenses which are listed above. Now, I'll give an example. I go to a particular shop. I go to a particular shop to buy some grocery items. When I buy the grocery items, I ask for a bill. The shop owner says, "Sir, you pay me in cash, you pay me in cash. I'll not generate a bill. If I generate a bill, 18% GST you have to pay." I repeat, when I go to a shop to purchase something, I pay to the shopkeeper a sum of rupees 5,000. When I give, say 500 rupees, make it simple. I give a 500 rupees note to the shop owner. When I demand for a bill, shop owner says, "Sir, if I give a bill, 18% is the GST you have to pay. So better I'll not give the bill for 18% GST." Now, if you encourage the shop owner, you will be the person. What they say? You're aiding, you're abetting, you're encouraging a person any of the offenses noted under section 122, subsection 1. So please, friends, keep in mind, it is not always important that only a person who is registered under GST law will be held responsible. No. Along with the person registered under GST law, a person who is helping, who is encouraging any of the offenses listed above shall also be a person for this penal provisions. Let us go further to understand. A person who acquires possession, who acquires in way of concern himself in transporting, removing, depositing, keeping, concealing, supplying, purchasing, or in any other manner, he deals with the goods which he knows, he has a reason to believe that these goods are liable for confiscation. Now, I'll draw your attention to this particular check post fraud cases. Most of the news you will come across, a vehicle was intercepted, the vehicle driver ran away. Why the vehicle driver ran away? Now, if the vehicle driver knows that these goods are liable for confiscation, the driver knows that these goods are unlawful, why will that person run away? This particular the provision says a person is having a possession of those goods. A person acquires a possession. Money, you are buying those goods. Now, I'll give one example. Many of the people come door to door to sell some textile products. That person who comes to your doorstep, he will say, "Sir, this material was imported from Singapore. For some reason, the shop owner has not accounted this. He wanted to sell in the open market. If you buy with a bill, you have to pay per meter 1,000 rupees. I'm selling per meter 500 rupees without a bill. If you possess those goods where you know that these goods are unlawful, or a person who's helping in transportation. When you are helping a person in transportation or removing, what do you mean by removing? Taking out the goods from the custody of officer, taking the goods from a place without authority of law, depositing, keeping, concealing, supplying, or purchasing. Now, any of these things you do, having a knowledge that these goods are liable for confiscation. Again, law says, look, along with the person who did that mistake, I will hold you also responsible for that particular offense. Law says, along with the person who did that mistake, you also shall be held responsible. Who? The driver. Now, is it wrong in holding the driver responsible for that particular offense? Answer is a big yes. Knowing that this is liable for unlawful activity, When a truck driver is doing the transportation, that is a punishable offense. Third, he receives or in any way consent with supply of services which he knows or reasons to believe that is it is in a contravention of the rules. Now, this point number three, I would say mega fraud. I would say point number three as a mega fraud. This particular aspect I call as a mega fraud. I call white collar fraud. Now, it is very important, friends. Now, you don't read this subject for the sake of your examination. Read this particular subject, how the acumen draftsman is thinking of unlawful events. This particular point number three is a high level white collar fraud where services are rendered. Let us read the language. Receives or is in way concerned with the supply or in any manner deals with supply of services which he knows or has a reason to believe these are in contravention of the provisions of the rules made thereunder. Services rendered entity A, entity B, entity C. Entity A, this is in say US. Entity B, this is registered in say Mumbai. Entity C, this is registered in say Noida. Now look at the way the billing activity happens. Noida, Mumbai, US. Noida is a place, Noida is a branch. Now Noida is raising an invoice on Mumbai. Mumbai in turn is raising an invoice on say a US entity. All these three, one, two, three, all these three entities are all fictitious entities. All these three are fictitious entities. When this particular thing, when there is a transaction between Noida to Mumbai, Mumbai to US, when this three level service is done, this is an activity, which is not actually a genuine transaction. Now, this fellow, for the sake of business, for the sake of turnover, is showed as if a service was rendered for a sum of rupees 10 lakhs to Mumbai. Who Noida fellow raised a bill for on Mumbai fellow. Mumbai fellow say yes, yes, I rendered this service to US. Or Mumbai fellow gave a contract on Noida fellow to give a service to US fellow. Now all this is a sham, bogus transaction. There was no actual rendering services. It is called a shallow company. It is called a dummy company. This is called this white collar fraud, which revolves around your creation of sham transactions. Now the law says you know that this is a shallow transaction. It is a bogus transaction. You fall a party to it. You frame one of the conceived party to that particular offense. Now what does the law say? Let me take you further. Now, also, if you fail to appear before the officer, if you fail to issue invoice or fail to account for that invoice, he shall be liable with a penalty which may extend up to rupees 25,000 rupees. I repeat, you fail to appear before the officer or you fail to issue invoice in accordance with the provisions or fails to account for an invoice. Any of these five offenses, first thing is you have helped them not to any of the contraventions. You supplied the goods, you supplied the services, you fail to appear when you are called for summon, or you have failed to issue an invoice in accordance with the law. Then they say a penalty up to sum of rupees 25,000, penalty which may extend to 25,000 rupees. Now, sir, is the 25,000 under CGST law? Answer yes. This is under CGST law. Penalty may extend. So under CGST law 25,000, under SGST law 25,000. 25 plus 25, 50,000 is my total penalty. Sir, erroneously, ignorance of law. Please keep in mind, ignorance of law cannot be pleaded. If any person who is not registered, who is encouraging a person to commit a fraud, who is encouraging a person to do something which is unlawful, the person who was encouraged shall also be punishable. Now, this is not something which is new under GST law. This is there in my CPC, Code of Civil Procedure. It very clearly says, When someone is doing a particular offense, you may not stop that fellow, but if you encourage that fellow to do that offense, you also shall be held responsible. Same provisions what is brought under your GST law. Truck driver, transporter, warehouse operator, go down in charge, the person who was encouraged to give bill, all these are the people who shall be held liable under section 122, subsection 3. So please keep in mind, this is one question which you can expect from theory examination for 2 marks. Now, friends, examination question is not a lengthy question. It's all small questions. One, two, three, four. You have to give a conclusion for all those three things. Now, one of the question which can be expected from this 122 subsection 3. Mr. X an individual purchased some items for Diwali celebration from one of the supplier in an electronic store. The electronic store person has supplied goods worth 15,000 to Mr. X. While taking those goods to home, Mr. X demanded for a bill. Mr. X demanded for a bill. Shop owner denied to give a bill because of GST. Mr. X want to save the GST and he also encouraged not to collect a bill. Examine the GST provisions. Now, please keep in mind 122 3 abates or aids or abets. Now, this Mr. X has encouraged the shop owner not to issue a tax invoice for the supply which has taken place, where tax was to be paid, not to be paid. Now, you can say, yes, this is a punishable offense under section 122, subsection 3. Sir, I don't know the sections. Don't quote any section number. As per the provisions of GST law, the activity of Mr. X is a punishable offense for a sum up to rupees 25,000 under CGST law, and also for sum of rupees 25,000 under SGST law. This would be your answer. Hope I have explained your 122.3. Next, a person who is required, now section 123. Now all along we discussed 122. Now we comes to section 123. This section 123 talks about your information written. Now what is this information written? Information written is a process where a proper officer has to give some information when was called for. I'll give an example. How and why this particular knowledge will be helpful. One of the finest provisions. I'll read the provision. I'll explain the background of this provision. If a person who is required to furnish an information written under 150 fails to do so within a given period under that particular section, proper officer may direct such person who is liable to pay a penalty of 100 rupees per each day for failing to furnish that information. Now, to make you understand this provision, I'll explain the background, which gives you a very good insight why this is being called for. Say, there is a company which is into manufacturing activity. You want to know whether this company is genuine in terms of furnishing the data which is given for assessment purpose. One information which you can think of is your electricity bill, your water bill. Every month, this particular assessing officer would like to know how much is the power drawn from the electricity board for the purpose of production activity. This gentleman says he did a turnover of 120 crores. He is into manufacturing activity of, say, tire. The tires which is used for automobiles. He is manufacturing those tires. He disclosed this turnover of 120 crores. Now, when I draw the electricity bill, I get to know that this particular gentleman pays hardly 2 lakhs per month as electricity. Now, the general calculation of a technical person. Now, vigilance, if you think of the team called vigilance, there is a person who did his MSc agriculture, the person who has done his MPhil in mechanical engineering. There will be a person who has done his PhD in electronics. There's a person who has done his PhD in accounts and bookkeeping. There's a person who has a doctorate in your medical science. These are all the people who are called together as a team. Now, these are the people who call for the data to analyze the information. Now, this is called information written. There's one provision called section 150. So the government officer can call that information for his desk review. If that government officer or any other private party who fail to give that particular information, they say a penalty under 123, 100 rupees per day, 100 rupees per day shall be levied. This is what they say. Provided that the penalty imposed shall not exceed a sum of rupees 5,000. Now, government officer, you cannot hold him in charge. You can levy 100 rupees per day, maximum 5,000 rupees. Reason, you're calling from information from the government officers. Now, they are duty bound to do their job. If at all, if there was delay because of their regular schedule or their regular work, don't punish them rigorously. You say, look, you're supposed to give the data, you have failed to give. That's why I'm going to call for some penalty from you. Penalty provisions are very severe. Reason, this information goes to the collector, the district collector. When the district collector knows that this is one offense which is caused by any of the local authority, they will take it seriously and they say this offense should not be paid by the board. Rather, the person in charge of that particular office should pay that in personal capacity. Now, once they pay in personal capacity, it will be recorded in their personal file. It is a black mark in their entire career. So, for that reason, this information written, which is called under section 150, if not given, maximum a sum of rupees 5,000 is what levied as my penalty. Now, who are all there under this 150? The persons called taxable person, the person who is already registered under GST law, or a person who is an authority under central excise, VAT, service tax, state, a person who authority under central government for collecting central excise or customs, state electricity board. Now, these are a couple of examples which I brought to your knowledge. Now, this is what the information gathered for any of your scrutiny or assessment related provisions. So friends, this is something called my assessment written. Then failure to furnish statistics. Again, similar to what I have given an example, there is something called section 151, where statistics have to be collected. Now, in the process of this scrutiny assessment, where they called for giving the statistics and the person who is supposed to give that data, he failed to give, then again, similarly, 100 rupees per day, maximum 25,000 rupees is what a penalty which will be levied under section 124. So what do you mean by statistics? It is nothing but they want some data to be analyzed. Example, Infosys, Wipro, XYZ Limited, who is also into the same business. Now they wanted to understand whether the turnover reported is incorrect or correct. To get to know that this turnover is right or wrong, to get to know whether this turnover is right or wrong, this information statistics is some data which will help for me for my scrutiny purpose. So from whom the power of statistics can be called? Commissioner generally by way of notification will say, for this industry, I need the statistics to be provided. Say IT sector or manufacturing sector of power looms, manufacturing sector of textile, manufacturing sector of say steel scrap. Now, industry specific, he can notify a particular person to give that particular information for his assessment purpose. Friends, we are on 10 o'clock, section 125, which deals with your general penalty. We will stop our discussion for today. We will stop our discussion for today. We have our next session tomorrow evening, 6 o'clock. So we'll continue with this discussion in tomorrow evening. With this, I come to end of my discussion for today. Thanks for your patience listening. Happy day to all of you. Jay? Jay, are you there?